Good day, everyone. My name is Mr. Chisum. Today, we'll be looking at the development of the individual parts of the alimentary tract. We'll be looking at the development of the individual parts of the alimentary tract. And we'll be looking at the development of the esophagus, the stomach, duodenum, jejunum and ileum, caecum, appendix, colon, rectum and anal canal. So we'll be looking at how these individual parts of the alimentary canal developed. So we've been able to see in the part one how the foreguts, the midgut and the hindgut developed. And we've been able to see how the midgut loop to form two parts, which is the pre-arterial part and the post-arterial part. So now we'll be looking at the individual development of the parts of the alimentary tract. So coming to the esophagus, around the third week, you remember how this part of the foregut gave rise to the respiratory diverticulum here. So this development of esophagus happened around the third week. So you can see the developing respiratory diverticulum, which gave rise to the respiratory system. And you can see this part of the foregut behind it. This part of the foregut between the pharynx and the developing stomach becomes the esophagus. It gave rise to the esophagus. And with the descent of the diaphragm, the formation of the neck, and also the expansion of the pleura, the esophagus elongates. So initially, when it forms, it was short, but with the formation of the neck, descent of the diaphragm, and also the expansion of the pleura, the esophagus elongates. And that is how the esophagus came about. So coming on how the muscles of the esophagus forms, it is the mesenchymal cells that surrounds the foregut. The mesenchymal cells that surrounds the foregut is what forms the muscles of the esophagus. And the mesenchymal cells at the two-third, around the two-third of this esophagus, give rise to striated muscle, while the mesenchymal cells around the one-third of the esophagus give rise to smooth muscles. So that is how the esophagus came about. So let's look at the stomach. Looking at this diagram now, you can see at the distal part of the foregut, or at the distal part of the esophagus, you can see how the stomach begins to form. The stomach begins to form by the dilation. It's kind of a fusiform dilation of the distal part of the foregut. So this is the distal part of the foregut, and you can see the fusiform dilation. It dilates in a way to give rise to the stomach. Now, at this point now, you can compare it with this. You can see that there is further expansion of the stomach, already developing stomach, and the stomach have the ventral border. This is the ventral border, and the ventral border lies close to the ventral mesogastrium. This is the ventral mesogastrium, and this is the dorsal border of the stomach, and the dorsal border lie close to the dorsal mesogastrium. And you can see the already developed esophagus. You see the septum transversum, that gave rise to the diaphragm and also the liver, you remember. So that is it. Now, this ventral border of the esophagus that lie close to the ventral mesogastrium, you notice that the ventral mesogastrium move from this part of the esophagus and move to the liver. Already this septum transversum is what gave rise to the liver. So this ventral mesogastrium move to the liver, and from the liver it moves to the diaphragm, and from the diaphragm it moves to the anterior abdominal wall. So the ventral mesogastrium that lie between the stomach and the liver gave rise to the lesser omentum. So the ventral mesogastrum that lie between the stomach here and the liver gave rise to the lesser omentum. While the ventral mesogastrum that move and lie between the liver and the diaphragm gave rise to the falciform ligaments and also the coronary ligaments. Then coming over to the dorsal mesogastrum, you notice that the dorsal mesogastrum is divided. It came to divide at a point, and the part of the dorsal mesogastrum that is immediately related to the stomach gave rise to the gastrosplenic ligament. That is the ligament between the stomach and the spleen. So you can say that the part of the dorsal mesogastrum that lie between the spleen and the stomach gave rise to the gastrosplenic ligament. Why this part of the dorsal mesogastrum attaches the spleen? The spleen is developing around here. So this part of the dorsal mesogastrum attaches the spleen to the posterior abdominal wall, and it is what gave rise to the linorenal ligament. So having seen how the stomach and also the surrounding ligaments and the lesser omentum came about, then if you look at what we have here, you notice that at a point, there is a differential growth in the orientation and the shape of the stomach. You remember that here, that the stomach is fusiform in shape, as you can see here. But if you compare it with what we have here, you notice that there is a change in the shape of the stomach and also the orientation of the stomach. So this ventral border of the stomach come to lie up, facing upward here to form the lesser curvature of the stomach, while the dorsal border of the stomach come to face downward to form the greater curvature of the stomach. And also the original left side of the stomach becomes the anterior surface of the stomach, while the original right side of the stomach becomes the posterior surface of the stomach. And having seen this formation of the stomach that happened here, let's go over to what happened in the formation of the duodenum. So coming over to the duodenum here, if you look at this diagram, this is the developing stomach up here, and this is where the duodenum forms. This is the midgut loop. Remember when we did the formation of the guts, how the midgut loop to the right. If you remember that diagram, this is the midgut loop. So the first and the second part of the duodenum is formed by the distal part of the foregut. So the distal part of the foregut that gave rise to the stomach still forms the first and the second part of the duodenum, while the proximal part of the midgut forms the third and the fourth part of the duodenum. Initially, the duodenum forms as a single tube. Initially, it forms as a single tube, but eventually the duodenum loop. So you see that the duodenum loop to the left. You notice that the duodenum loop to the left. This is it. Initially, it is formed as a single tube, but as development occur, it loop to the left, as you can see here, and eventually it loop to the right. So because of further development, the duodenum that loop to the left eventually turn to the right, as you can see here. So this is the duodenum facing the left side, but with further development or further differentiation, it come to face to the right. And the duodenum is attached to the posterior abdominal wall through the mesentery, known as the mesoduodenum. But eventually, at the later stage of development, this mesoduodenum come to fuse with the peritoneum of the posterior abdominal wall, and immediately it fused with it, the duodenum eventually become a retroperitoneal organ. That is why the duodenum is retroperitoneal, while the rest of the small intestine are not. So that is what happened in the development of the duodenum. So coming over to the jejunum and ileum. The jejunum and ileum are derived from the prearterial segment. You remember the looping of the midgut when we did the formation of the gut. You remember I told us that the midgut loops to the right. So this is the midgut looping to the right, and to form two segments, the prearterial segment and the postarterial segment. So the jejunum and the ileum is derived from the prearterial segment of the midgut. So this part of the midgut gave rise to the jejunum and ileum, the prearterial segment. And when the jejunum and the ileum is formed from these parts, they further grow in length. They further grow in length and also root around. Also, the terminal part of the ileum is derived from the postarterial segment. So, but mainly the jejunum and the ileum is derived from the prearterial segment. Then coming over to the caecum and the appendix, you notice that since the prearterial segment forms the jejunum and the ileum, then coming to the caecum and appendix, you remember the cecal board here. So at the initial stage, there was no cecal board, but because of the endodermal thickening and also proliferation of cells around the postarterial segment, you notice that there is a thickening here. There is an outgrowth here, close to the postarterial segment, and this outgrowth is known as the cecal board. Now, it is this cecal board that gave rise to the caecum and the appendix. So, if you look at what we have here, you see the cecal board. This is the outgrowth, the cecal board. Then this is the terminal part of the ileum. This is the cecal board. So this is it. Then if you compare it with this, you notice that the cecal board grow in size and also in length. So this is still the cecal board growing in size. This is the cecal board growing in size, and by then another outgrowth from the cecal board appear. Another outgrowth from the cecal board appear. Note the difference so that you will not be confused. It is this small cecal board now that grow into this. That grow into this. Now, another outgrowth appear from this cecal board, and that outgrowth that appear gave rise to the appendix. Why this one remain the caecum? Look at it here. So when this happened, you notice that the appendix lie in the terminal part of the caecum. That is where it lie. But after birth, during adulthood, this is the medial border of the caecum, while this is the lateral border of the caecum. So during adulthood, you notice that the lateral border of the caecum comes to grow in size more than the medial border of the caecum. So you see the lateral border of the caecum growing in size when compared to the medial border of the caecum here. So as this happened, the appendix that lie initially at the terminal part of the caecum come to move to the medial part of the caecum, and this is the appendix here. So this is the position of the appendix during adulthood, and this is the position of the appendix at birth. So that is what happened. So going over to the formation of the development of the colon, we have the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the descending colon, even the sigmoid colon. So we'll be looking at the development of each and every one of them. Then coming over to the ascending colon. The ascending colon develops from the posterior segment. So this is the posterior segment, which is distal to the cecal board. So that is where it develops from. The posterior segment distal to the cecal board. That is where the ascending colon develops from. The right to third of the transverse colon develops from the posterior segment of the midgut lobe, while the left one third develops from the hindgut, and that is why the transverse colon, the right to third is supplied by the superior mesenteric artery, while the left one third is supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. Remember the artery to the gut that we discussed during the formation of the gut. If you remember, the superior mesenteric to the midgut, the inferior mesenteric to the hindgut. Because the left one third of the transverse colon developed from the hindgut, that is why it is supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. Then coming over to the descending colon. The descending colon, the sigmoid colon, all develops from the hindgut. So let's look at the rectum and the anal canal. So coming to the formation of the rectum and anal canal, you remember when we did the formation of the hindgut, I told us that this is the hindgut. Now at the ventral part of the hindgut, there is an outgrowth that appeared there, thickening of cells that appear there, and this grow or elongate, which I call the allantois, which is the allantois. Below the allantois becomes the cloaca. That is the part of the hindgut behind or distal to the allantois becomes the cloaca. So this is the cloaca. You notice that here that the urorectal septum comes to divide the cloaca into two, and it appears in between the hindgut and the allantois. So you see the urorectal septum dividing the cloaca into two. And as of here, you see that the cloaca has been divided into two completely. And this part gave rise to the urogenital system, while this part give rise to the rectum. So the rectum is formed from the cloacal part of the hindgut. So that is what gave rise to the rectum. This is the rectum. Then coming to the anal canal, this cloacal membrane, immediately the urorectal septum divides the cloaca into two. You notice that this part of the cloacal membrane becomes the anal membrane. It becomes the anal membrane, and they are endodermal in origin. Then below the anal membrane, you see the anal pit, and it is the proctodum that gave rise to the anal pit, and these anal pits are ectodermal in origin. So the anal canal is formed by the endoderm of the anal membrane and the ectoderm of the anal pit. So the endoderm of the anal membrane and the ectoderm of the anal pit give rise to the anal canal. So that is what we have in the formation of the different parts of the alimentary tract. So let's look at the rotation of the guts. Let's look at the rotation of the guts. You remember that the midgut moved to the right when we did the formation of the gut. You remember that the midgut moved to the right, and you can see that from what we've seen so far, many of the structures of the alimentary tract came from the midgut. So let's look at the rotation of this midgut. At this stage now, you can see how the midgut is moved to the right. But coming over here, you notice that there is an kind of a 90-degree anti-clockwise rotation. There is a 90-degree anti-clockwise rotation. Note the difference between this loop with this. You see that there is kind of an anti-clockwise shift. You know that the clockwise is like this, like this. This is clockwise, but this is anti-clockwise loop and it is 90-degree. It's slightly bent. And as this happens, as you can see here, you notice that the prearterial segments come to lie to the right side, while the postarterial segments come to lie to the left side. So this becomes the prearterial segment, and this part becomes the postarterial segment because of the shift, because of the loop. So that is it. And as this happens, when this is happening outside the abdominal cavity, in the space outside the abdominal cavity. That is where this is happening. Then when this happens, notice that, remember that the jejunum and the ileum forms from the prearterial segment of the midgut, which is this. So at this point, the jejunum and the ileum begin to increase and also coil around. This is it. And all of this is happening in the outside the abdominal cavity. When this has happened, you notice that the posterior segment further shifts. There is further shifting of the posterior segments, which gave rise to the caecum, appendix, and the colon. And at this point, the colon has not yet been differentiated. But as the posterior segments continually move to the left side and move up, you notice that there is now differentiation between the ascending colon, the transverse colon, and the rest of it. So that is it. And at that point, the transverse colon come to lie anterior to the superior mesenteric artery. And when this has happened, the small intestine and the large intestine come to take its definite shape and position. At the end of this, they all move back into the abdominal cavity to take its definite shape and also definite position. You remember that this is the position of the caecum, but after this rotation of the gut, you notice that the caecum come to lie to the right. So this is the cecal board that gave rise to the caecum. And also, having seen the rotation of the gut, let's see the mesentery. The mesentery come to appear and attach the small intestine and also the large intestine to the posterior abdominal wall. So the mesentery of the small intestine is known as the mesentery proper, which attaches the small intestine to the posterior abdominal wall. And that of the ascending colon is known as the right mesocolon. Transverse colon is known as the transverse mesocolon, and descending colon is known as the left mesocolon. So this mesentery now appear to attach the intestine to the posterior abdominal wall so that it will remain in its exact position. So we've come to the end of this teaching. I'll encourage us to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Learn with Chisom Great. Like this video, share this video to your friends, and comment on this video. Thank you very much.